What's up, everybody? This is David Angel coming at you guys again. This is the next video in the series. Now that you have learned about circuits and wires and some basic electrical current knowledge, now we're going to start to go on to, um, we're going to transition from knowledge to actual skills, okay? So we're going to be talking about bending conduit. Conduit is, I don't know, you might have seen it before, but it's pretty much pipe. And when I say pipe, I mean tubes of metal. And then it's, very basic, simplest form. That's what conduit is. Conduit is the proper name. That's what you should call it and refer to it as. Conduit is simply tube that's metal, okay? It's 10-foot pieces. They're always going to be 10-foot pieces. And it's just literally a stick of a tube. This the inside, and it's made out of metal, okay? You have a couple of different types of conduit, okay? So this video is going to be about conduit and bending pipe. Bending pipe, when I say pipe, I know I just said refer to it as conduit. So if you're like on the job and they say, hey, I need 10 feet of 3/4 conduit, that's what most foremen will probably say. That's why I'm saying refer to it as conduit. But when you're talking about bending that conduit, most people just say bending pipe, okay? Same thing, conduit, pipe, but we'll just learn both. But if you say conduit, it's a little bit more professional. It's a little bit more, it's a proper term, okay? All right, so this video is going to be conduit and bending pipe. Once again, I'm going to say both names so you can get used to it. You can get used to saying both, and so you can remember that they're the same thing, okay? So there's 3 types of conduit, first of all. There's one, EMT. Excuse me about my throat's getting a little sore, so if I cough or whatnot, excuse that. Okay, the first type is EMT. That's the most common. EMT simply means electrical metallic tubing. You don't really have to know the exact definition. I'm not gonna lie, that was a question on one test a long time ago, but just know what it is, okay? Electrical metallic tubing. EMT, electrical, because this is electrical work. Metallic, because the pipe or the conduit is made out of metal. Tubing, because it's a tube, okay? So electrical metallic tubing. It's not super important, but just know that if you come across a question, it should be kind of obvious. Electrical metallic tubing, okay? That's the most common, and really the only thing that's going to differentiate these 3 is the thickness of the metal, okay? All 3 of these are 10-foot sticks of metal tube to run. They're used for the exact same purpose. Well, yeah, to put wire in it. The biggest difference physically is going to be the thickness of the metal, okay? EMT, it's going to be very light. It's going to be a very light metal tube. Then you're going to have IMC, and then you're going to have RMC. Now, I know I just said it's not super important for you to remember what these actually mean. Just go ahead and remember, okay? I'd rather emphasize on you learning what that means, and then if you don't need to use it, then oh well, then me be like, okay, don't learn it, and then you come across questions. So just learn it, okay? EMT is the most common. Once again, let me erase this. EMT is electrical metallic tubing. Okay? IMC is the most rare. Okay? You're hardly ever going to work with IMC because IMC is used on occasions that aren't very common, and most of the times that situation you can use EMT. Or if it's going to be a wet location, then you're just going to go ahead and use RMC. Okay, EMT is your typical pipe, is your typical conduit. That's why I said it's the most common, but it is not waterproof, so you are never ever ever going to run any EMT on the outside of a building or anywhere that might be damp. Okay, EMT is the most common, it's the one you'll mostly use, but never use it on the outside of any building or in a location where it's going to be wet or damp. Okay, for wet locations, for outside jobs, you're always going to use RMC, which is rigid metal conduit. Okay, now IMC is pretty much in between both. It's going to be uh, literally, like I just said, the only difference between these physically is the thickness. So EMT is really light, rigid is pretty heavy. Okay, rigid's pretty heavy because it's a lot thicker, and then EMT literally is just a tube, and RMC is a tube, 10-foot sticks, like I said. It's the exact same, but RMC has these ridges, ridges right here on both ends. And it's really hard to illustrate. I will provide a link to a picture so you can see exactly what that is, so you can familiarize yourself with it. But these ridges is pretty much just so you can screw on a coupling. Okay, this pipe is still a 10-foot stick, it's still metal. The only difference is it's the thickest out of these three, and then it has those ridges so you can screw it onto another piece of pipe. And the point of that is so you can screw it on really tight, and then it will be waterproof. So that's the purpose of the little ridges, so you can screw it onto another piece of pipe using a coupling, and then it's going to be on so tight that it doesn't matter if water comes onto it, water's not going to get in there. The EMT coupling, I'm not going to get into couplings, that'll be in the next video about material, but EMT is joined by the same thing. You can connect two or two pieces of pipe with a coupling, but that coupling is not waterproof. Okay, water can potentially get in there. That's why you'll never use that for waterproof or outside. Whenever you're going to do that, always use rigid. Okay, so IMC, you're never going to really use that, but just so you know, that's intermediate metal conduit. Okay, once again, you're hardly ever going to use that. Just know that that's what it stands for, intermediate metal conduit. Okay, now RMC is what we just talked about. It's rigid metal conduit. Okay, and the reason that's rigid, you can see that intermediate is like in between, and it's between EMT and RMC. So these are pretty self-explanatory. If you ever come across the question that I told you I've seen before of pretty much what is EMT, it's electrical metallic tubing. That's what that is. IMC is intermediate metal conduit. This is metal, it's made out of metal, so that's the M's. Conduit, this is what I told you, this conduit. Intermediate is in between EMT and RMC. So use that to remember that, okay? And RMC is rigid metal conduit. The reason it's called rigid is because, like I just said, it's the thickest out of all three, and this, it's the heaviest out of all three. So remember, the rigid is the one that has the little ridges for you to screw on a coupling, and that's going to be for use on all outside jobs or whenever it's going to be, a damp or wet location. So these are the three types of conduits. You will hardly ever use IMC, and it's going to be rare for you to use RMC unless you're on certain jobs, okay? Most jobs are always going to have EMT and only EMT, if they even have EMT, okay? Some jobs use MC cable, which I'll get into that later, okay? All right, so now that you know that the three types of conduit or pipe is EMT, IMC, and RMC, electrical metallic tubing, the most common, only indoor use. IMC, intermediate conduit, intermediate metal conduit, is the thickness of the metal is in between both, and that's pretty much when they want extra protection. EMT is too thin in case people might be stepping on it or things like that, but it's not going to be a wet location. They might use IMC because it's thicker, it's a little bit stronger, but they don't want to spend the extra money on rigid. All right, so once again, you'll hardly ever use that. And then rigid metal conduit, the third one, which is the heaviest, the thickest, and it has the ridges, so you can screw it onto another piece of pipe with a coupling, but actually screw the pipe with it with the coupling to the point where it's waterproof and it's sealed. Okay, and that's going to be for all outside jobs and in wet locations. Okay, so now that we know that, now we're going to talk about the different sizes. Okay. Those three are the different types of conduit, but within each type, you have different size pipes, okay? Sometimes you're just gonna run one circuit, which is 3 wires, from point A to point B. So you just go from, you might use a small pipe from point A to point B. Other times, when you're doing these big jobs and you're using big cable, obviously that's not gonna fit in a small pipe, right? And then especially for the bigger cable, you're still going to need 3 or more wires. So then obviously you need bigger pipe to fit that wire. So now that's what we're going to talk about. The 3 different types of conduit. Now within each of EMT has all of these sizes, IMC has all of these sizes, and rigid has all of these sizes, okay? I don't want you to get confused with that. So the sizes are this. The smallest size is 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch pipe, then it's 3/4 inch, then it's 1 inch, and then it's literally like by 1/4 inches, 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch. It skips 1 3/4 and it goes straight to 2 inch, and then it goes to 2.5, and then it goes to 3 inch, and then it goes to 4 inch. Okay, and they can go up to 6 inches. 6 inch is the biggest conduit available. Okay, there's not an 8 inch pipe, there's not a 10 inch pipe, not with electrical. There is with other trades, not with electrical. Okay, so 6 inch is the biggest size conduit. You don't have to memorize or learn that. I'm just telling you the sizes. Just so you can be comfortable, or so you can see the different sizes, okay? But the most common is going to be this one, 3/4. That's one you're always going to be using. You're always going to be bending 3/4 EMT pipe, okay? Now 1/2 inch, you'll hardly ever run that. The only reason people run 1/2 inch is on a lot smaller jobs, or for like data wires or things like that, from a device to another device or things like that. But you're never going to run 1/2 inch from a panel to a device or anything like that, okay? Always, 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 you're going to be using 3/4 or a bigger pipe, okay? The most common is going to be 3/4. The second to that is going to be 1 inch. And then after you get 1 inch, all of this is for like kind of special occasions. inch and a quarter, it's going to be a little bit more common than the rest. These are going to be like for special projects, like from the big generator to the main panel, things like that. Okay, so just be comfortable with 3/4 EMT conduit because that's what you'll run the most. However, in all interviews that I've been, they always ask this, and whether you're applying for a helper or a mechanic or whatever, they always ask the pretty much it's called the take up, okay? And we're gonna get to that. That's more in the bending pipe section. I want to finish talking about conduit first and get that concept out of the way, okay? So we said 3/4 EMT is the most common, but you're gonna have to memorize, you know, when it comes to actually bending the pipe, you're gonna use a bender, okay? And I'm gonna provide a link with some videos where you can actually learn how to bend the pipe. Like you'll actually see someone bending the pipe and the process to that. I was gonna do it, but I feel like since there's already videos out there that that already explain it very clearly. I'm just gonna provide that link, and then you can go and look and see exactly how they're doing it physically. But what I want to teach you, because it's really the most important thing. Some people make you bend pipe then and there. Most people don't, but they do ask you. Okay, so that's why I'm teaching this. So you have to when you bend pipe, and let's say you're gonna have certain types of bends. Okay, you're gonna have to take a couple of inches away from the measurement that you want. Now, without getting you confused, pretty much what I'm trying to say right now is you're gonna have to remember or learn the numbers involved with bending pipe for 1/2 inch, 3/4, and 1 inch. Okay, the rest don't worry about. They will never ask you, hey, how much do you take away from your measurement to do a 90 on a 2-inch pipe? They'll never ask that, but they will ask for 1/2 inch, 3/4, and 1 inch. Okay, so that's what we're going to move on to right now. All right, so now that we talked about conduit and everything related to it, you already know the types of conduit that are available, what the use for them, the uses for them, what differentiates each of them, from one another, and the different sizes that you're going to find, and what sizes we're going to focus on right now. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and actually get into bending pipe or conduit. Okay, so for bending pipe, and this, because I'm not going to actually teach you here one-on-one unless we do a one-on-one session, then I'm going to go through this a little quickly, and then you'll see it in the next video actually being done. Okay, so there's 90, offset, saddle. Okay, there's 4 bends, okay, in total. There's 4 different bends in total. So pretty much the reason you're going to be bending this pipe, remember I talked about conduit, how it's metal tubes. The point of that metal tube is so you can stick wires in between it and get that wire from point A to point B. So you might go from a panel, come out with a metal pipe, and go all the way to a receptacle, the box of a receptacle inside of a wall. Obviously, you don't see the pipe, right? The point of that is to stick wire get wire from the panel to that receptacle, but protect it from everything else. Okay, wire, it has the insulation so you can touch it and you're protected from the electricity. But if somebody drills a hole in the wall in the sheetrock and they drill through that wire, it can electrocute them, or at the very, very least, it's gonna flip the breaker and you literally have to pull brand new wire because the wire there is messed up now. So it's just for safety precautions, to keep everything professional and up to code, then you have to run, and this is only commercial. Okay, In houses, you don't see any of that pipe. You use different type of wire because there's not enough space. But for commercial, where you're going to be working, you go from point A to point B with a metal conduit, and you obviously, if it's 10-foot sticks, you can't just put one 10-foot sticks there or a little piece there and then put another piece there. You have to bend it so it can go where you want it to, so you can go above the obstacle that's in your way. If you're trying to get from point A to point B behind here, you have to bend the pipe so you can go on top of this board and go down with it and get to point B. That's the point. That's the reasoning behind bending the pipe, okay? To get from point A to point B and protect the wire, because the wire is going to be inside, and it's going to take a lot more for you to damage the wire inside of that metal tube than if it was just hanging everywhere, right? So the point is, there's 4 types of bends. The most, and these are all, I can't really say one's more common than the other, even though one kind of you'll see it a little bit more than the others, but you're going to see them all equally. They're all just as important, etc., etc. So this is in no particular order, but definitely learn this, okay? Because bending pipe is a huge part of being an electrician, especially when you're starting off. And it doesn't matter if you're not perfect at it, you at least have to know all of this stuff. Like, if they ask you, what's the take up on a 90? You have to know what a 90 is. You have to know what an offset is. You have to know what a saddle is, right? So that's what I'm saying. Learn all of this stuff. So the first type of bend is going to be this type of bend. Realize that all the metal conduits are literally 10-foot sticks of metal tubes, like this. And the most common is 3/4, so that'd be about like that big in diameter, okay? So the first one, and I'm going to do a little illustration just so you can see it. It's going to go like this. Now this, it doesn't mean that this is the entire stick. It has to be 10 feet long or whatever. No, this is just a piece of it, okay? And this is called a 90, okay? A 90. Why? Because you're literally doing 90 degrees. You're turning 90 degrees. You're going straight, and then you're making 90 degrees to the left or 90 degrees to the right. Okay? This is literally just called a 90. They call it a 90 because it's 90 degrees. Okay? That's the first one. That's if you have to make a left or if you have to make a right, if you have to go up or go down. That's that. First, I'm going to tell you what they are, and then I'm going to tell you how to do them and the numbers that are important with each one of these, okay? The second one is going to be an offset. And this is pretty much going to be like this. It's going to go straight and then go down like that. Okay? That's going to be an offset. It's pretty much, you're going straight at this point, and that, let's say that there's a pipe or something right here. So then you're going straight. There's a pipe straight ahead. So you go below that pipe and keep going straight. That's all that is. Literally just an offset, right? This is called an offset. The third type is called a saddle. And then this is when you're going straight. And then you go up, straighten out, and then you go back down and straighten out. The main purpose of this bend is to jump something, okay? It's literally 2 offsets put together, but it's a different one in and of itself, and it's called a saddle, okay? A saddle because it looks like a saddle, and the main point of a saddle instead of an offset is, remember we were going straight and there's an obstacle here, so you go down with it and keep going straight. With a saddle, there's something blocking you here, but let's say there's something blocking you here too. So if you do an offset, if you're going straight, here comes an obstacle. Let me go up with it, and with an offset. Oh, but once you go up with it, you can't keep going straight because there's something else here. So instead of doing that, and we're gonna assume that this is the ceiling, okay? Because you're like, well, why don't you just go up higher, right? That's the ceiling, so you can't go up any higher. The point of a saddle is to keep going straight. You're coming up to an obstacle, so you go up with it to dodge that obstacle, and then you go back down with it um, to the same height that you were at initially. Now you can always go down a little bit more with it, whatever, but this is the most common. The point is just going up with it and then coming back down. That's a saddle. Technically, I should be saying this, that is a 4-point saddle. Okay, that's a 4-point saddle. Most people just call it a saddle, but because I'm going to tell you the other type, let's make sure to put 4-point saddle. Okay, and the fourth type is going to be literally the same thing as this, but it's going to go like that. And the obstacle here would be it would be a smaller obstacle, okay? The only difference between 3 and 4 is this is a 3-point saddle, because you'll see you have 1 point here, you're going straight, then you're turning at this point, and then you're turning at this point. Okay, so the main difference between these two, this is a 3-point saddle, and they call it a 3-point saddle because it's 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, instead of it being 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points. Okay, that's the reason behind a 4-point saddle and a 3-point saddle. Okay, the main difference here is this is only for small objects. If you have a 3/4 pipe and you're trying to jump over another 3/4 pipe, this is when you would do a 3-point saddle. You wouldn't do an entire saddle because that'd be exaggerated. And believe it or not, whenever you're running conduit, a lot of people don't care how it looks. They don't care that the pipe is straight. They don't care that it's, it looks nice and this and that. A lot of people do, and definitely try to be the people that you do, because there's a lot of boss mans out there that expect it to look nice, expect it to be straight. Okay, there's some bosses out there that don't give a shit. They just want it from point A to point B, and they don't care how it looks or anything. I'm not that type of people. I'm not that type of person. I like my work to have, I like to have pride in my work and for it to look nice. And that way you will never have a problem with a boss coming up to you and saying, what is this? I mean, people have gotten fired over this because it's a big deal. Okay, so this is to jump over small objects. This is to jump over bigger objects. That's why you're going to need that 4-point saddle, right? These are actually very rare. Okay, a lot of people don't know how to do 3-point saddles. So we're not even going to worry about that, because they're not going to ask you anything about a 3-point saddle. They're going to ask you about a 90, offset, and a 4-point saddle. They're not going to ask you about a 3-point saddle because they know a lot of people don't know about them. So we're not going to talk about it, but I did want to introduce you to it, okay? And so you can know what it is. If somebody says, a 3-point saddle, you'll know what they're talking about, okay? So those are the 4 different types of bends. Now, how do you bend it? Okay, you don't just randomly put the pipe on the bender and just bend it and cut it at the two sides. You have to have certain formulas to get this measurement, to get this bend with the measurements that you need. Okay, now let's talk about that real quick. Let's say, and let's use an offset at this. Let's say that this is the floor. right here, you're running the pipe straight. The top of this pipe, let's say it's 4 inches. 4 inches to the top of the pipe. And then the top of the pipe here is 1 inch because 3/4 is 1 inch in diameter. Don't get confused, but that's just how it is. So you have 1 inch to the top of the pipe here, and then you have 4 inches to the top of the pipe here. How are you supposed to do this bend so it can be like that exactly? Okay, let's say that we don't have this measurement yet. We're running it at 4 inches to the top, and then if we keep doing that, we're going to run into this object right here. So we have to go down with it. You don't just say, just bend it and just see how low it gets, or let's hope that it does pass it. No, all of these bends have an exact formula, so you can get it right each and every time. Okay. So if me as a mechanic and I'm like, okay, we're at 4 inches to the top, let's make it 1 inch to the bottom. So pretty much putting it on the floor. Okay. So we can make sure that we go over this obstacle, because let's say it's a little bit bigger. Okay, right like that. So I'm like, okay, in order to pass by this, we have to just sit it on the floor. Now you as a helper, you're gonna have to bend it. And once again, you don't just bend it randomly. There's a formula. So then if you're trying to get from 4 inches to the top to 1 inch to the top, there's a specific formula so that when you do it, it will literally go from here to there as I wanted it to, okay? All right, so now we're actually gonna get into the numbers, okay? Now it's gonna be a little hard to explain it because I'm not actually showing you the points of how to put it on a bender and this and that. But the most important thing here, and that's what I'm here to tell you and teach you, are the take-up, the numbers. You know, they're going to be like, how much do you take off the measurement if you're trying to do a 90 on a 3/4 inch pipe? So what they're asking you is this. On the 90, this is the 90. Let's say that I ask you, give me a 5-inch 90. No, give me a 10-inch 90 from up, from the height wise. So I need a 10-inch 90 from this point to the bottom of the pipe. I need it to be 10 inches, okay? And then the other side, I need it to be 7 inches. So let's do that. If I'm telling you that I need a 10-inch 90 and then the other side needs to be 7 inches long, that means you're going to bend the 90 and I expect it to be 10 inches from the beginning of this conduit to the bottom of the conduit, and then from, pretty much you flip it. From the bottom of the conduit to the beginning of the conduit is going to be 7 inches, because whatever I'm doing up there, that's the measurement that it needs to have. It can't be off. It can't be, a different number. It has to be that. So how do you do that? Pretty much you do a formula. For a 90, that formula for a 90, you're always going to do x minus 6. And then that will give you your mark. Okay? So if I tell you, give me a 10-inch 90, like I just said, give me a 10-inch 90, then you're going to substitute x for the length of the 90 that I just said. Okay, so you would do, okay, he wants a 10-inch 90. You're always going to subtract 6 because we're talking about 3/4 pipe here, right? The most common, 3/4 pipe EMT. You're always going to subtract 6 because that's the formula. You're substituting what I want of 10 inches with that x, and then you're applying the formula minus 6, and then you're going to get, here you get 4. So you're going to put a mark on 4 inches. The way that works is, right here you have your conduit, right? You're going to put your tape measure from the very end of it, and you're going to measure out 4 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the 4th inch, because 4 is the answer, that's where you're going to put your mark. Then you're going to grab this piece of conduit and put it on your bender And after you put it on the bender, you're going to use the mark. The bender has different marks. It has a mark to use for 90s, for offsets. So you're going to grab and put the pipe, you're going to put this mark on the mark for 90s on your bender. You're going to see that in the videos that I'm going to provide for you, okay? The important thing here is this is the formula, the -6. That's all. Okay, now I didn't want to just say remember -6 because it's going to be hard to remember if you don't have no clue, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, right? So everything that I've just been teaching you is leading up to this. Learn a simple number. Okay, it's super easy. It's super easy, but I wanted you to have the understanding behind it because, like I said, I can tell you, okay, when they ask you this, just remember -6, -6. Okay, but you're not going to know. If they ask you a different way, then you're going to be completely lost. So up until this point, the main thing that they're going to ask you is, how much do you take off of a 90? How much do you take off of a measurement to get a 90-degree bend on a 3/4 EMT? Okay, once again, let me rephrase that. They're going to say, how much do you take off when you're trying to get a 90-degree bend on 3/4 EMT? What they're asking is, how much are you going to take away the formula, because that's always going to be the same. They're asking, how much are you going to take away if you're trying to do a 90, okay? Now, this is what I was saying. I need a 10-inch 90. So what are you going to do? You're going to get the number that I tell you, which here is irrelevant because it can be any number. So the point is, you're trying to do a 90-degree bend, and you're going to take away 6, okay? 4 3/4. So now that I said that, then this is what you're going to have to learn. And this is what they're going to ask you. How much do you take off when you're trying to make a 90 for 3/4? Okay? 3/4 EMT. When you're trying to make a 90-degree bend on 3/4 EMT, you're going to take away 6. You're going to take away 6 inches, which is what we set up here. When you're trying to make a 90-degree bend, the same bend, on 1/2-inch conduit EMT, you're going to take away 5 inches. Instead of 6 inches, you're going to take away 5 inches. If they ask you, how much do you take off when you're trying to make a 90-degree bend, the same type of bend, for a 1-inch EMT, you're going to take away 8 inches. Okay? So these are your answers that you have to provide. Okay? Like I said, I wanted you to understand all of this, but ultimately what they're going to be asking you is possibly to bend it, but very unlikely. But what they're going to be asking you is, hey, so-and-so, how much do you take off when you're trying to make a 90-degree for 3/4? 6 inches. How much do you take away when you're trying to make a 90-degree bend on 1/2-inch conduit? 5 inches. How much do you take away when you're trying to make a 90-degree bend on 1-inch conduit? 8 inches. These are your answers. This is what you have to learn. Now, I wrote on here EMT, but in reality, it doesn't matter if it's EMT or IMC or rigid, it's going to be the same. 3/4, if you're trying to do a 90-degree bend and the size conduit is 3/4, you're going to take 6 inches away. If you're trying to do a 90 and it's on 1/2-inch conduit, you're going to take 5 inches away. If you're trying to do a 90 on 1-inch conduit, you're going to take 8 inches away. Learn this, okay? Okay, now that we talked about 90s, we're going to talk about offsets. Okay, offsets are another thing that they're going to ask you. To be honest with you, most people are only going to ask you about 90s, but a lot of times they do ask you about offsets. And offsets are very simple. I mean, 90s are very simple. The only difference is if you're going to use 3/4 or half inch or 1 inch. That's where the answer changes. But offset, remember, offset is when your pipe goes straight and you go down with it and then you level out again. Like that. Because there's an obstacle here. All right. So you're either going down with it, or it can be, you can flip this upside down and you can be going up with it, or to the left, or to the right, etc. The point is, that's an offset. The way you do this is, let's say we're at 4 inches. Let's say we're at 8 inches to the top of the pipe here, to the top of the pipe, and I want, from the floor to the top of the pipe, you have 8 inches. Okay. Now, in order to dodge this obstacle, we have to go and put the top of this pipe under this obstacle, obviously. So we're going to go, let's say I'm going to need the top of the pipe here to be at 3 inches. Because this obstacle, the bottom of this obstacle is at, let's say, 4 inches. Okay? From the bottom, from the floor to the bottom of this obstacle, it's 4 inches. So in order to avoid it, we're going to leave 1 inch gap in between. The 1 inch gap is irrelevant. Don't pay attention to that. You don't have to memorize that. It doesn't have to be 1 inch. You can put it up close to it. Not very professional. You can leave 3 inches, in between. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. The point is, from the floor to the bottom of the obstacle, it's 4 inches. So in this scenario, we're going to go with our pipe from 8 inches to the top to 3 inches to the top in order for us to dodge the obstacle. Okay, so how do you go from 8 inches to 3 inches? Very, 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 very easy. This is the formula for offsets. I'm sorry. You're gonna do, let's say, okay, so here, if we're going from from the top to 3 to the top, then you go 8 minus 3 is 5, right? That means this offset has to be 5 inches, so it can go from 8 inches to the top to 3 inches to the top. That means the difference is 5 inches, right? So then you know that the difference is 5 inches. The only thing that you got to do is go x times 2 equals your mark. Or in this case, it's going to be your second mark. Okay? The first mark, you can do it anywhere on the pipe. That just depends, okay? If our pipe is starting here and there's 2 inches, or if there's 4 inches, if there's 4 inches from the point where it starts to the first bend, then your first mark would be 4 inches. But if our pipe starts back here and there's 10 inches from where it starts to the first bend, then your first mark is going to be 10 inches. So the first mark is irrelevant. Once again, I'm just telling you as an example, but don't worry about that. The first mark, the mechanic is going to tell you where to put it. They're going to be mark it at 10 inches and then give me a 5-inch offset. Okay? So the formula here is x times 2 equals your second mark. You're going to substitute the difference, which is the height of your offset. In this situation, we said we're going from 8 to the top to 3 to the top. So the difference is 5 inches. That means we're going to go down 5 inches. So that's what you're going to substitute x with. It's going to be 5 times 2, because times 2 is the formula, and that's going to give you the second mark. Okay? So let's just do an example here quick. Let's say that we're doing this and our pipe starts here and there's 10 inches from here to the first bend. So I'm going to tell you, hey, mark it at 10 inches. So you're going to grab your tape measure, put it at the end of the pipe, mark 10 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. At 10 inches, you're going to mark the pipe, and that's going to be your first mark. Okay, remember I told you, I'm going to tell you where to mark the first one. First mark is irrelevant. And then I tell you, I need a 5-inch offset. I need a 5-inch offset, okay? Because we're going from 8 inches to 3 inches. So that's 5 inches. That's the difference. I need a 5-inch offset. What you're going to do is put it in the formula. The formula is times 2. That's all. That's all. It's times 2. X times 2. So then you're going to put the difference, which is 5 in this situation, into the formula. 5 times 2 equals 10 in this case. Alright, the video cut off, but the point is, that's the formula for the offsets, okay? For the offsets, all you have to do is remember times 2. If they're like, the only thing they want to know is, if they're like, what are you going to do if I want a 5-inch offset? All I got to do is, they just want to see if you know you got to times it by 2, that's all. If they're like, you want a 5-inch offset? Okay, the distance from your first point to your second point for a 5-inch offset is 5 times 2 is 10. It's 10 inches. If they're like, give me a 10-inch offset, what are you going to do? Okay, then all you say, the distance from your first mark to your second mark for a 10-inch offset is 10 times 2 is 20, is 20 inches. Okay, that's all. That's all for that. That's all the really, what they're going to ask you as far as the bending conduit. And that's all for this segment of the training. I'm going to send you the links to the actual on how to bend it, so you can see a person actually bending, and they'll be describing how to do that also. Okay, if you want one-on-one training for that, if that's even available, like if you're near me, then we can do something with that. Okay, I'll see you guys on the next video.